Hey, today we're going to do some spring cleaning. We're going to ask the question, how much is enough? You see, we're programmed to believe more is always better. Like one car is good, but two cars are better. One kid is good, four kids, sorry, that doesn't work. Anyways, I'm in this fight right now when it comes to our TV. The problem is this TV just won't break. Now it's a 42-inch LCD TV. Now there was LCD TVs before there was LED TVs. So this thing is like 15 years old and this thing's heavy. I remember buying it for $600 thinking, man, this is a steal. Now, could we get a better TV? Absolutely, and trust me, it's tempting. I'm finding all kinds of good deals on them. I have all kinds of friends who have these amazing TVs. I'm like, oh, it'd be so nice to have. But I've had to make this tough decision that what we have right now is enough. It still works. You see, the thing is, we're addicted to more, and it's just like any other addiction. When we get something new, it feels good at the moment, then it's kind of like, on to the next. You know, what's the next project? What's the next big thing we're going to buy? Have you ever gotten to the point of saying, I have enough? What is enough, anyway? We're almost never satisfied. The wisest man who ever lived, Solomon, observes this never-ending chase for more. In Ecclesiastes, he writes, "And I saw that all toil and all achievement spring from one person's envy of another. This too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Fools fold their hands and ruin themselves." Now, Solomon lays out two extremes. On one end, there's this toiling and achieving, trying to attain more. And notice where he says this comes from. He says, "And I saw that all toil and all achievement spring from one person's envy of another." Now, how true is that, right? We end up pursuing things in order to one-up others or be on the same playing field with them. We call it keeping up with the Joneses. Now, Solomon makes an assessment of this pursuit when he says, "This too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind." It's kind of this idea of herding the wind, trying to contain the wind. I mean, how do you do it? It's almost harder than herding cats. What Solomon's trying to say is you never arrive at this goal if you're always trying to pursue more. There's always going to be somebody who has more than you. There's always going to be something else you can attain. There's never going to be enough. On the other hand, there's this other extreme he lays out, and he says in verse 5, "Fools fold their hands and ruin themselves." Now, folding your hands is kind of meaning doing nothing with your hands. It means being lazy. Now, Solomon's saying, I'm not saying this is the way to be either. Now, you and I have seen the effects of laziness with people. Now, what if there was an in-between, a middle way? Now, Solomon goes on to say, Ecclesiastes 4:6, I think it's just such a powerful verse. You might want to read it a few times, actually. Ecclesiastes 4:6, "Better one handful with tranquility than two handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind." Better one handful with tranquility. Better a palmful with ease, I like what one translation says, than two handfuls, right? Because when you have two handfuls, you can't do anything with those hands. It kind of leaves you stuck. And so one handful is better because when I have just one handful, that means I have a hand where I can hand others something, that I'm free to help others. Now, this is a seismic shift from the pursuit of more to the pursuit of enough. Now, I think there's a lot of ways we can apply this. We can say, like, we can apply this to our time and how we spend our energy. But what I want to do today is I want to get all up in your business and I want to talk about our stuff. How do we make the shift from the pursuit of more to having peace with enough? I want to offer 3 doable next steps toward pursuing enough. Now, maybe you need to write down some thoughts that come to your mind as we go through these. But here's the first thought is this: downsize. Downsize. Now, I'm one of those people who enjoys helping people move. Like I've always say, these muscles just aren't for show. But I'm pretty sure everybody I've ever helped move has said the following, and I'm sure you can guess what 5 words they always say. I have too much stuff. Now, I want to challenge you. Maybe you don't have no desire to move anytime soon, but I want to challenge you now. Don't wait till when you move to let go of some of your stuff. Downsize. There is a freedom that comes with less. Right now, we deal with so much decision fatigue. I notice it when I turn on the TV and try to pick something out on Netflix, like a show or a movie. There's so many options. I just get overwhelmed and I just end up picking the same show that I always watch. We do that with clothes. We have a closet full of clothes. It almost gets harder to pick out what to wear. Costco is our favorite store, and what I don't like about Costco is how much money we end up spending when we go there. But what I do like about Costco, and this is probably why I end up spending so much money there, is because they have way less product selection. And so I don't have like this decision fatigue when it comes to shopping. They rarely have more than one type of thing to choose from in different categories. There's a Wall Street Journal article that actually talks about decision fatigue, and they cite a study that found that people were more apt to buy jam when they were shown fewer choices. So when they had 24 options of jam available, it says that only 3% of people made a purchase. But when they eliminated 2/3 of the choices and made it down from 24 choices of jam to 6 jam, that's 75%, right? I can't do math. But anyway, six options, they found that 30% of consumers made the purchase of jam, less choices. Same thing they discovered in Bed Bath & Beyond. They decided they're going to cut back their choices on can openers, and they ended up finding that their sales of can openers actually went up 30% because there was less choices. The thing is, stuff gets overwhelming, and so we need to cut back, we need to eliminate, we need to downsize. And practically speaking, what does it look like to downsize? I want to give us some chronological steps to take when it comes to downsizing. First of all, take an honest look at what you have. Make an honest assessment. Ask questions like, have I used this in the past year? Have I worn this outfit in the last 6 months? How many pairs of jeans do I actually need? Or what about shoes? No, you didn't just go there, Andy. Yep, I went there. I went there with shoes. Now I'm going to say this, just because it's organized doesn't mean you still need it. Organized junk is still junk. So make an honest assessment of yourself, the stuff that you have, and pay special attention to the excuses that you make for keeping things. And then ask yourself, when it comes to these excuses, ask yourself, really? Really? Then after this assessment, make a pile. So the next step, make a pile. Parents, you can involve your kids in this. You can make a game out of it and say, hey, let's find 10 things that we want to get rid of and put in a pile. Let's maybe make it 25 or 50 or 100 things. And then the third step, have a garage sale. Have a garage sale. Or better yet, donate to the thrift shop. And this is probably an appropriate time for me to give my yearly public service announcement to you. And I'm going to look you straight in the eye here. Please do not donate your unwanted junk to our church. Unless we're asking for something specific, or unless it's a TV larger than 42 inches that you can donate to me, we are not your middleman. Some people want others to make the decision to let go of things for them. But put on your big girl pants, your big boy overalls, and let it go. Marie Kondo offers this tip. Marie Kondo is a Japanese guru on decluttering, and she says that sometimes when you have a hard time giving something away, she offers these suggestions. And it might sound a little weird, but for some of you it might be actually really therapeutic. She says, hold the item. Hold it. And then she says, relive the time that you got it. And then say goodbye to it. Thank it for serving its purpose in your life. Maybe saying 30 years ago, this really blessed me. You know, this whole idea of, we call things mementos, which is interesting because they're really reminders of moments that brought us joy. Past tense, right? Brought us joy. And what we're doing when we say goodbye to these things we let go, it sets you free to do something else. Now, it's not discarding memories. You shouldn't need an item to remind you of a memory. That's why we have a brain. But by storing away your past, for so many of us, we're unable to live in the present and look toward the future. This is super difficult for us because maybe you did not grow up with very much. Maybe you have this mentality, I don't want to waste anything, or I might need it someday. And maybe you will, whatever. Maybe it's sentimental to you. But let it go. Life does not consist in the abundance of stuff. Better is one handful with tranquility, right? With peace. Than 2 handfuls with toil, right? With clutter, downsize, right? So after you've had your garage sale, if you have a garage, this step's pretty simple here. Use your garage to park your vehicles. Enough said. Okay, and then the 5th step, stop buying. Maybe ask, how can we downsize rather than trade up? Maybe I can go without that newest model of phone. Maybe I'm a few models behind, but it still works, and it's okay to just kind of stay where I'm at. Maybe for every trip that you take for leisure shopping, you're saying, I'm going to drop a load off at the Goodwill on the way to the store. Start shifting toward enough thinking by downsizing. That's the first thought, downsize. Secondly, pay off. Debt does not bring you peace. Like Solomon says, acquiring debt to impress others or feel good about yourself is a vain pursuit. Morgan Housel, in his book, The Psychology of Money, makes this interesting observation when it comes to his time that he had when he was a parking lot valet. He would see some really nice cars pull up, like Ferraris, Lamborghinis, Rolls Royces, and he said that it was his dream to own one of those cars of his own because he thought that people would look at him and think that he was important and rich. But Housel goes on to write, saying, the irony is that I rarely, if ever, looked at them, the drivers. When you see someone driving a nice car, you rarely think, wow, the guy driving that car is cool. Instead, you think, wow, if I had that car, people would think I'm cool. Now, somebody here watching right now needs to hear this. You don't need another car loan. Maybe you also need to hear there is no such thing as good debt. Debt is debt. Now, some of us need to start saying, what I have is enough. Living debt-free is fun. Remember, better one handful with tranquility than two handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind. Better a car that's paid off than a brand new one with payments that stress you out. Better a smaller house than fighting over a big one with large payments. Better is having some financial margin so you can help others out than living paycheck to paycheck. The richest people aren't the ones who have the most, but they're the ones who need the least. So I want to give you a practical one thing that you can do when it comes to paying off debt. And it's essentially, it's just one question I have to ask you. And this is, right now, it's March 2021 when I record this. And so this might not apply to you if you're watching it a few months from now. Here's the question. What are you going to do with your stimulus check? Now, whether you agree with getting a stimulus check or not, what I'm saying right now is that many of us will be getting a stimulus check from the government. Now, if you don't want yours, I can figure out how to spend it. So I'll put the email below. Now, some of us, we're going to be coming upon a windfall, $1,400 per person in a household. Now, if you have 4 kids like I do, that's practically $100,000. Now, some of us need to decide right away, my stimulus check is not going to be used for a trip. It's not going to be used for a camper or for a newer phone or for another gun even. It's going to be used for paying off debt. It's going to be used for establishing an emergency savings fund. Now, how do I start prioritizing enough? Downsize, pay off. The third big idea here is, and this is really what it comes down to, how do we prioritize enough? Give away. Give away. The point of settling for enough is so that you can have margin. Here's the deal about this message. This is more than a message about having a garage sale. If that's the only takeaway you got, then you're going to end up needing to hear this message every spring. And because every spring you have accumulated more stuff and you're going to need another garage sale. The point of the matter, and this is the deal that Solomon's making in Ecclesiastes, we need to change our whole understanding of stuff. He isn't saying that it's bad to have possessions. Remember, he says one handful with tranquility. But because there's a hand empty, we can lend a hand, we can give to others. What is the point of having possessions, of having money in the first place? Stuff is to be leveraged for kingdom work. Let me say that again. Stuff is to be leveraged for kingdom work. We are merely stewards. Our stuff isn't for us. It's for God and His purposes. Nothing I have is mine. Maybe you need to say this with me. Nothing I have is mine. Now, some of you aren't so sure about that. You say things like, I've worked hard for this. And yes, you did. But nothing you have, nothing I have is mine. Maybe you find yourself not wanting to let somebody borrow or to borrow something to somebody. You might have a problem because maybe you're starting to see that thing as yours. For some of you, maybe you're thinking somebody else will give. Or maybe you're thinking, I'm not going to open up my home to have people over or show hospitality. Listen, and some of you might be tempted right here to judge others and say, yeah, I can totally think of people who have all this stuff and they're not sharing it. But what about you? What about you? If you got something but you don't want to share it, I'm sorry, you may need to go back to preschool where my son is at right now. He's learning how to share. I'm sorry, I said it. See, God is a generous God, and He has built principles for His followers to be generous. Even in the Old Testament, when they planted crops, He gave instructions with their land. He says, don't harvest the corner of the land. The reason being is that to save some of the crop on the margins so that it could be given away to the poor, so the poor could kind of come and glean from it. so they would have food to eat. In the Old Testament, we see this principle of tithing, which is setting aside 10% of everything that you earn and receive, 10% from the top, giving it back to God, giving it to the church. The early church actually had this box that they kept their offerings in, and they would use it to help meet the needs that would arise in the community. One of the things they were famously known for, which people on the outside always thought was weird, is that the church would pay for funerals for those who couldn't afford them. And so when we give to the church, we're giving toward his causes. We're recognizing that this is all his in the first place, that we are blessed to be a blessing. Aaron Damani writes about generosity. He says, generosity, as it is taught in Scripture and modeled by Jesus, is relational, not transactional. Although generosity sometimes involves cutting a check, this is never the heart of it. Biblical generosity is a posture of openness to bless our neighbor with our personal presence, our love, and in some cases, our resources. So practically speaking, what does this look like to give away? Damani suggests one thing in his book, saying, create a neighbor fund. Like, in other words, maybe have this envelope with money that you set aside when you want to spend money on non-necessities, and you say, I'm going to put this aside. And I'm going to ask God to show me who and when to bless with this money. Parents, this can be something that you can do with your kids, saying, let's set aside all of our coins and then we'll use this for something. Maybe it's choosing to use your garage sale money for a purpose of blessing other people, to giving it away. I'm so proud of a group of girls in our church. They decided on their own to have this free hot cocoa stand at the park this summer. Now, even though it was free, what was funny is they somehow ended up making more money than they did at their summer lemonade stand. And so they decided to give all the money away to help the needy. And so what they did is they actually sent it away to a legit nonprofit. So maybe it's having this neighbor fund, give it away. Maybe it's giving a deserving person a bonus, blessing an essential worker. Maybe it's a restaurant server, just to show somebody that you're grateful for the ways they serve others. Maybe it's giving a scholarship to send a kid to summer camp. Summer camp can be such a life-changing experience for so many people. And even our church, we send kids to camp and we provide scholarships. And maybe you want to give, I'll put the link below, but maybe that's a way that you can give toward others. Maybe it's starting to practice giving a tithe, 10% of your income back to God. I know that sounds really, really high. Like, why would I give God 10%? In our lives, we personally made the goal to give more to God each year than the year before. Now, I'm not trying to toot our horn, because we have seen God defy math over and over again. We can never outgive God. Parents, it's important to teach this practice of tithing to your kids, teaching them that it's more blessed to give than to receive. And maybe another next step when it comes to giving away is just asking the question, how can what I've been given be leveraged for purposes outside of myself? Now, this is something that we do as a church. As a church, we have three main values, and the overarching thing of this is that we value things that aren't things. So we value accessibility, being accessible. We value being a community team player. We value the next generation. And so for a congregation of our size, we have a relatively small building. But what we do have, we've made this decision that we want to leverage this to be more accessible, to be more community-minded, to invest in this next generation, that we want to be a blessing to our community. We want to use everything that we have to bless the community around us. Now, maybe you're thinking in your own life, I don't have much. Look around. Look around. God asks Moses this interesting question, saying, what's in your hand? Kind of think of that question. What's in your wallet? But looking around and saying, what do I have? Now, how do we know how much to give away? C.S. Lewis asks this question. He says, I do not believe one can settle how much we ought to give. I'm afraid the only safe rule is to give more than we can spare. In other words, if our expenditure on our comforts, luxuries, amusement, etc. is up to the standard common among those with the same income as our own, we are probably giving too little away. Ouch. He says if our charities, in other words, if our generosities do not at all pinch or hamper us, I should say they are too small. In other words, he's saying, if it doesn't make you squirm, and if you don't feel the pinch, then you're probably not giving enough away. Now, I want to close with a teaching of Jesus. There was actually these two guys who were having an argument over their inheritance in Luke chapter 12. We would never have that argument, right, over inheritance. That would never happen today. Jesus said to them, he said, watch out. It's kind of like Jesus is saying, catch this. There's a warning ahead here. Here's the warning. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. Be on your guard. He's saying it's so easy to get sucked into this moral lifestyle. Life isn't about how much stuff you have. Then he goes on and he tells them this parable. He says, the ground of a certain rich man harvest. And he thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, this is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones. And there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? Then Jesus goes on and kind of throws in this zinger here. He says, this is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, right? This pursuit of more for yourselves, but is not rich toward God. Listen up, folks. Life is too short. Nothing you have is yours. It is for God and his purposes. What you and I have is enough. Let's pray. God, I pray you would help us, show us what this looks like, maybe to downsize, to pay off, to give away. We would be generous people, just like you are so generous to us. Guide us as some of us take some very courageous, frightening next steps toward being able to finally say, what I have is enough. We ask for your help in the name of Jesus. Amen.